Hi everyone. I can't see anyone in the room, but I trust that you're there. I apologize that I can't be there in person tonight as planned. Unfortunately, I wasn't feeling well enough to travel, but hopefully my presentation will still kind of convey everything that I would have delivered in person. I'm going to share my screen now with the presentation that I've put together. It's going to kind of cover a sort of short introduction on the methods of forensic architecture. So I'll do a short introduction on the methods of forensic architecture and how the kind of practice has developed, and then I'll focus on the Namibia investigation that I have worked on the past 2 years, 2.5 years. And before doing that, I'll also kind of present a short segment about one of the projects that also looks at the kind of entwined issues of environmental violence and land dispossession in Colombia. So maybe to begin with, I'm sure most of you in the audience are already kind of aware who forensic architecture are, but we're an interdisciplinary group that operates across human rights architecture, art, journalism, and legal forums. And the agency has been sort of described in the past to have co-created a new academic field and emergent media practice. And that is because we our investigations employ various techniques that combine spatial analysis and media research in order to model and reconstruct incidents of human rights violations. We usually investigate states, corporate entities, that includes police, militaries, government agencies, and private corporations, basically for the violent acts that include repression, deaths of civilians during conflict, structural racism in policy making and enforcement, as well as violence against migrants and refugees. And recently, we've also kind of started looking more into historical and colonial violence in particular with the Namibia case. And this includes kind of long-term and slow manifesting destruction of environments. The term forensic, the word itself is derived from the Latin word forensis, which means pertaining to the forum, as in the kind of Roman forum that would kind of describe a space of public politics where law is enacted and written in a community. So the kind of spheres of politics, law, and economy are combined within that space. Since then, however, the meaning of that word has shifted and refers in a kind of more mainstream sort of understanding as a police power of forensics that can reinforce the power of states. However, the kind of practice in the field of forensic architecture, what it does is sort of aims to invert that case, meaning this counter forensic practice, inverting the kind of hegemony of these tools back onto the states and actually gives the power of communities to the communities in bringing the evidence of their crimes against citizens to the surface, in making them visible. So in the pursuit of this accountability, we seek to work across forums, from courts and parliamentary inquiries, youth commissions, international media, but also, and probably predominantly, exhibition spaces, cultural spaces. Each of these forums has its own benefits, but also limitations. While in courts we struggle for the admissibility of such citizen-produced digital evidence, in cultural institutions we employ art or visual presentation in visual media as an investigative and political medium in order to transform the gallery into a space for seeking accountability. The task of civilian investigation is to collect and then process often huge amounts of data, of information gathered, often on social media, and then to unpack and understand the story that is woven through putting those images together. Right now I'm showing clips from the Israeli bombing of Gaza in 2014. I kind of purposely wanted to show the kind of material from 10 years ago, as that's sort of how, or when the practices of forensic architecture was sort of kind of in their nascent years. However, the unfolding and ongoing genocide in Gaza is also, of course, one of our main kind of topics of focus right now. And some of this work you can see at your own convenience on our website right now. By using these techniques that we often refer to as geolocation and working mostly with 3D modeling as our sort of bread and butter technique, we can begin to synchronize and place these disparate images and video clips in time and space. So this practice we often refer to as kind of image complex. This is what the 3D space of a modeling software allows us to do, and we're often able to kind of cross-reference, cross-corroborate events that show only snippets of an event that allow us to create a more complete, a more complicated reconstruction of what indeed occurred and unfolded. So this image shows this kind of idea of the notion of an image complex quite successfully, in that the same event can be captured from so many different perspectives that only the 3D model is able to communicate effectively. Yeah. And that's why we endeavor to present our investigations across multiple forums that transform those very forums in the process. What you see on the screen right now is a picture from our event from last year entitled Inherited Testimonies, when we presented at the time our ongoing and in progress work on the Agata Nguyen Chuong genocide in Namibia. In Berlin at the House of World Cultures, during which we actually departed from our usual sort of way of exhibiting into a sort of more performative presentation of collective testimony that was delivered in front of a large curved screen together with our Namibian partners. During this event, their testimonies were delivered as a sort of act of collective reconstruction together with our team, a reconstruction of an environment as a form of world building and navigating within it. The aim of this event, Inherited Testimonies, was to contest the Western legal context in which testimony is a institutionally regulated act. It's an act that is very circumscribed and siloed within a very particular hermetic space of the court. During this event, we wanted to trouble that setting and conduct a kind of delivery of testimony in a form that's immersive and situated, that lends itself much better to a kind of transgenerational oral testimony that is central to the Nama and Devahera cultures of remembrance and recounting the events that happened more than 100 years ago, where no surviving witnesses still live. Now I'm going to present a few slides from the project on the. There might be some sound coming from these slides, but okay, maybe I'm just going to turn it off for now. This project in Colombia that I mentioned earlier, So forensic architecture worked with the Colombian Truth Commission during the process of reconciliation and transitional justice that happened a few years ago. And in this process, we analyzed the mechanisms of land dispossession in the region of Nueva Colonia in Urabá, where processes of land dispossession of campesinos, so local farmers, took place, and the transfer of their land unfolded in a kind of very violent process where massacres in which commercial monocrop banana companies were involved. In this region of Urabá is really the heartland of the country's banana industry, and it is very well known for its kind of infamous extreme political violence that has really gripped the region since the 1980s. So the paramilitary groups and the massacres that they kind of inflicted on the people living there have driven away thousands of people from their land, who have left behind their homes, but also agricultural land. So through this project, we really wanted to show how dispossession occurs in shadow of armed repression and massacres. And this terror that was spread by private military, paramilitary forces served local and international banana producers. This includes Chiquita, for instance. And this was all kind of happening and unfolding under the protection of the Colombian military. This project really kind of illustrates very well this process of situated testing that we refer to. So this is a sort of interviewing technique that forensic architecture has developed over the years in trying to reconstruct spaces of trauma, events of violence, together with witnesses by sitting with them in front of a screen and reconstructing these scenes, these events that are often sort of quite inaccessible to people due to the trauma that they experienced. In this particular project, what we pioneered and then developed through the Namibia work was this process of environmental reconstruction. So what we're doing here with one of the campesinos is trying to reconstruct his plot of cultivation. A campesino plot would have a very particular way of sort of designing the cultivation plot as a garden that is a very biodiverse space, in contrast to the banana monocultures that now surround this whole space of the campesino plot. And through this project, we also analyze land dispossession through kind of three structuring elements, three elements that structure the land. The first one being the farm, the second one being the canal, and the third being the shoreline. What you see on the screen now is a kind of object library that we always kind of put together for every investigation. In this case, there's a lot of plant species. You'll see a very similar kind of setup later for our situated test with Hornkranz. So together with the campesinos here, we are trying to reconstruct the land that has been lost through the process of land dispossession. That plot no longer exists. These campesino plots, as I've mentioned, are kind of intricate and these intricate assemblages of species, and often can also take almost a decade to construct. They're always a very careful and ongoing negotiation with the soil and water because of the very kind of particular climate and region, which is very low, very close to the sea, and is often inundated. So this form of the campesino plot that we kind of unpack and reconstruct here is really this sort of register of the ongoing violence that threatens the future of these communities. And it's for this reason that we work with the farmers that have this sort of lived experience and very fine knowledge and very detailed knowledge of all the plant species and of the environment there, to reconstruct what they fought so hard to protect, which is a way of life and cultivation that is kind of combines, on one hand, the kind of prioritization of species diversity and a very kind of attuned relationship to the land, much like the indigenous peoples in Namibia would have, in the face of the encroachment of the banana monocultures that not only degrade the land, but actually also make it disappear. So here, what you see on this clip is the canal, and part of the project was this very intricate analysis of the architecture of the canals, which actually kind of have several, I think, 4 different scales. So the canalization, say, of the land, kind of architecture of them, really kind of govern the flow of water, which is essential to successful farming in this region. And the banana monocultures, what we kind of reveal through the investigation, have completely disrupted the kind of traditional way of building and making those canal trenches as it was done by the campesinos. What we have learned through our reconstruction, what you see now is a kind of super detailed photogrammetry model of one of the canals. What we have learned through our reconstruction is that the large canals that are made by the big banana monoculture companies actually divert water in such a way that eats away at the shoreline, making it disappear and erode. We're going to see this in a moment in this kind of remote sensing analysis clip, which I can maybe, well, I can't really skip through. Sorry about that. Do it like this. So you see here that the 4-meter large canals that are visible in satellite imagery much outweigh or much outsize the kind of traditional campesino canals that are only 1.5 meter wide and barely perceptible through a lot of the satellite imagery. So a lot of what happens in these lands is the water being kind of diverted into the large canals that then, due to the sheer water flow through them, end up eroding the shoreline, the coastline of the region.
¿Qué pasó? O sea, todo el mundo se fue.
Sorry about that. Now I'm going to play a clip with sound, so hopefully you can see it. This clip is going to basically show a brief sequence of reconstructing one of the sites of the massacre, which has since been inundated because of the shoreline shifting so much inland.
¿Qué pasó? O sea, todo el mundo se fue, como
por lo menos los de Coquito, sobre todo los Coquitos, varios se fueron por mucho tiempo, meses. Inclusive yo me fui por 10 meses, duré por fuera. Claro que yo venía semanal, en los fines de semana venía por ahí a darle vuelta a las cosas, a las parcelitas.
So the red belt there indicates the site of the massacre, and how far it is from the present day shoreline, essentially.
Throughout recent decades, the shoreline along Nueva Colonia has been altered in two ways, by progradation and erosion. Progradation occurs when a river delta grows outward into the sea. The Curulao River Delta to the north and the delta of the Rio León to the south are two very clear examples of this process. Erosion describes the way in which land is lost into the sea. Collaboration with biologist Juan F. Blanco helped us to understand how these processes are interrelated. In the land classification study produced by Blanco's team and Paulo Murillo Sandoval, we see how the progradation of the river deltas in the north and south, which is caused by increased sediment loads coming from large-scale industrial banana plantations, seen here in yellow, accelerates the erosion in the middle, around Coquitos, La Teca, and Calle Larga. Since 1984, these two communities have lost 157 hectares of land. Calculating this loss solely relying on satellite data is not possible, as the satellite cannot distinguish between mixed vegetation and the small diverse cultivations of the campesinos. Both are classified here as light green. The diverse composition of the campesinos' farm is
Stop here, but the reason basically I wanted to play the sequences in full is, I think, because it illustrates quite effectively the sort of difficulty sometimes of working with all these disparate sort of data sets that differ very much in resolution, and the kind of process or a lot of the work that we do basically relies on assimilating together and making sense of those data points together, in as much as they feel very different kind of like resolutions of what is unfolding on the ground. And you'll see more of that, I think, in the next investigation that I'm going to show you, which is the Namibia work that is being exhibited at the gallery. And I'm going to start with this kind of sequence that I think you'll see on the column in the room, that shows our first kind of iteration, or the first phase of this investigation that we worked on in 2022. It basically shows this sort of colonial photograph that was originally a postcard, and the kind of violence represented by the kind of fragmentation of life that occurs in a process of representing people as part of their landscape, as a kind of way of documenting very particular frame and naturalization, kind of showing and posing indigenous people in a state of nature, as we would kind of refer to it here. I think the kind of process of placing these photographs within their original environment, where they would be captured at the time in 1904, here is kind of developed through this notion of photographic restitution. The kind of context of this work, and why the reason why we started working with the Hera and Nama people in late 2021 was the kind of bilateral negotiations that were ongoing at the time between the German and Namibian governments in the context of reparations for this genocide that was only then, only a few years ago, recognized by the German government as such, as a genocide that was committed by Imperial Germany. However, Germany's recognition of this genocide is heavily qualified by the intertemporal principle, which essentially means that a legal question needs to be assessed based on the laws of that time. This might sound a bit kind of technical, but basically what it means is that Germany now disclaims legal responsibility for paying reparations out to the descendants of the victims of this genocide. And so we were invited by the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights, who had already had contact with the Namandova Hero, in order to basically produce this body of visual evidence that rewrites the history of this genocide on the terms of the Namandova people, who weren't even consulted and part of this negotiation process. And in order to kind of expand the thinking of reparations as a practice that's much wider and also encompasses kind of thinking about the restitution of land and environment, for instance, the restitution of archival material as well as objects that were looted during the genocide, and this includes human remains. So in order to counter and read beyond these photographs, we rely in our research on oral histories, like I mentioned earlier. And this technique of situated testimony that FA has developed over the years has here kind of taken on a new iteration whereby we do not interview the eyewitnesses of this event, of course, because these events are so distant in time. We can only interview their descendants. So what we rely on is the kind of very sophisticated, very fine way of remembering that the Namandova Hero people have, often through praise songs. Often it's in form of songs that are passed down individual kind of clans that exist within both groups. So within this investigation, we reconstructed here on the screens this homestead at Wittenberg, where one of the main battles during this war of resistance. This is the way I refer to it. One of the main battles took place, and we reconstructed one homestead of one of the clan that we later actually identified in a photograph that we found in one of the archives. What we realized this photograph was capturing is a sort of is a site that on top of this homestead, after the battles, a German cemetery was established on. So what you see here is a later image taken after the genocide, where the soldiers that basically died during this battle were buried, and we were able to see with our spatialization of the archival imagery and the visit on the site that the two overlap exactly. So going to the site and constructing this homestead was one thing, but actually putting the two together and seeing that today's German genocide perpetrator gravesite is located on top of it was a kind of new information, even for the descendants of this very clan. Another way of kind of working with descendants is to kind of work in efforts of memorialization and preservation of their heritage. What you see on the screen right now is the hanging tree on which a lot of Ahero people during the genocide were hanged. And today it's one of the main memorial sites for the other Ahero people, where they gather every year. to commemorate specifically the date of the extermination order on the 2nd of October. So this was just a week ago. What we did during our field work is actually kind of collected a lot of footage of this tree, which at the time of our visit was already collapsed on the ground. This happened, we were told, due to the degradation of the soil on the site, which is actually an effect of the progressing land degradation and desertification of the land. What we see here is this process of reconstructing from kind of millions of these points that are generated through the footage that we captured, and kind of creating this 3D model as a digital memorial of this tree that has since collapsed and is no longer standing memorial. And here I'll speak. I'll try to keep it brief because I know that this is the main piece of exhibition right now, but maybe to just contextualize a little bit of our research and process on the Hornkranz project, and why it was important to talk about the massacre, but also the kind of afterlives of that event, and how the genocide's traces manifests itself within the environment on the site. So this is the kind of one of the most recent investigations of our second phase of the work that looks into the very little studied early colonial massacre of Hornkranz that happened more than 10 years before the official time frame of the genocide, so 1904, 1908. This event happened in 1893. But the reason we were asked to work on it by the Nama traditional authority is because to them, this event really constitutes the beginning of the genocide. This is in part due to kind of the totality of destruction that took place and the intent that was expressed in writing by the German general at the time. We drew on very limited archival material about this site, and aimed to basically produce a new body of evidence about it, again drawing on interviews conducted through situated testing with historians and a lot of archival research. During our archival research, we realized that this cartographic process and the kind of function of cartography at the time was really to precipitate the violence to come and the dispossession to come. So we see in the earliest map that shows Hornkranz with its kind of place name. It's a given German place name for what was called this in Nama before. This map, which was drawn just 6 months before the massacre, really kind of enacts and prefigures the very act of expulsion and the massacre through its cartographic representation. The only visual kind of record of Hornkranz was this one sketch that was drawn by a German soldier at the time of the massacre. So we see the burning houses of the Nama people at the moment, essentially, of the dissolution of the settlement. We see the first and the only depiction of that place. And again, here you see this process of building out this entire world using Unreal Engine, game design software, to reconstruct this entire settlement before it was destroyed, for that day of the massacre. In this attempt and effort to to create a kind of space for a restorative process of bringing back to life a kind of lost life world and a way of living within the environment that the Nama enacted through their semi-nomadic way of life. What you see here is the historian that studied this particular site for years, as well as the history of the Nama clan for a long time, and he's done a lot of interviews with elders before they passed away. We're basically aiming to approximate the rough extents, the rough shape of the settlement within its very particular kind of topography by a river on a very hill, rocky terrain. What we learned through this process that wasn't known or obvious to us before is that we were actually able to look for very faint traces within the present landscape, a kind of very particular arrangement of rocks and cleared out spaces, as well as the vegetation distribution, to determine and understand how the houses were actually placed at the time and how this kind of arrangement or the traces of those could have looked like at the time. And what you see here is a sort of analysis and a survey of those potential traces on a large kind of very detailed image taken with a drone. A lot of our work happens sort of at the threshold of resolution of a lot of the material that we work with. You could see that in the Colombia project, but also here with this one image that we found in the archives of the site already after the genocide. We were actually able to see this very, very faint kind of trace or one last remaining element of the Vitboy settlement, which was the church that was built by the Nama people who lived there, which at the time of our visit was just a very faint foundation, but at least we were able to place it based on the foundation in its correct position. And here I'm going to show you how we proceeded to essentially analyze the environment of today's Hornkranz and how it's changed since roughly the 60s, which is the very earliest data point that we were able to find, being the archival, an aerial image of the site taken through an aerial survey. We're able to actually compare the density of the bush cover on the site, which is perhaps to Europeans a kind of counterintuitive thing to analyze, because the kind of default understanding that we have as Europeans is probably that green vegetation is a good thing, and if there's an increase in that, that's probably a good sign, or it means that the landscape is healthy. However, it's actually quite deceptive when we're talking about kind of savanna landscape that was previously actually dominated by rich kind of grassy species that were able to sustain large kind of populations of herbivores, as well as cattle. However, this a kind of closer look at these processes reveals to us that the increase in bush cover is actually a sign of land degradation, and that the woody species, the thick bush, actually draw out moisture from the soil. So a similar process happened in the region where the hanging tree had fallen. The bush species actually degrade the landscape by eroding its soil, and therefore making landscapes more arid than they used to be. Here on the screen, you see this process of reconstructing the grass cover the way it used to be, with the grass being much thicker and abundant. And here, something that was very important and really the key to the Nama's way of inhabiting the landscape was that they were semi-nomadic, thinking about the kind of availability of very scarce resources such as water and grass, and that they wouldn't stay or settle, kind of conform to a sedentary way of living that the German settlers were trying to impose on them, which was also part of the reason why they were attacked in the massacre in 1893, is because they refused to be captured and circumscribed within these kind of parameters of sedentary living, and were refusing to cede their land and abandon their ways of life. So through this process of trying to essentially reconstruct this environment the way it was at the time of the massacre, with the current density, which is much easier to reconstruct based on contemporary satellite images, we can literally place all of the bush instances or all of the individual plants manually, one by one, or by approximating their density through a kind of algorithmic calculation. We're able to kind of see this comparison of what the landscape used to be then versus what it is now. So here you can see a drone footage that shows the site today. Today it's a private farm, so the site is in no way kind of commemorated and recognized as a heritage site. Instead, all of the land that you can see until the horizon belongs to one man, and it's the kind of feature of the land dispossession and the way it kind of translates onto contemporary land ownership patterns in Namibia, with 70% of farmland belonging to descendants of the settlers, of the German settlers, instead of the Nama and Navajo people whose populations were decimated during the genocide, but also his land was fully expropriated.